With the Daytona 500 having come and gone, another super speedway race has come and gone, which means, of course, controversy is on the horizon for most NASCAR fans in the sense that, well, the green-white checker rule is now up for debate again among fans and industry members. I honestly gotta say I'm really interested in this just because this has been one of the more popular changes that NASCAR has made since 2003, which really is when they started making a lot of changes. The green-white checker or overtime rules first started being implemented in the NASCAR Cup Series in 2004 after some not so good finishes because of the old rules. And since then has been adapted to the way that NASCAR has adapted over time to be more entertainment based and try and bring a green flag finish. But now, because of the 2023 Daytona 500 ending so abruptly and so poorly, as well as Kyle Busch losing out on the chance to win a Daytona 500, which would have been a huge story, it's up for debate again. So what we're going to do is look at the pros and the cons and ask the question of should NASCAR overtime be abolished or changed in any way? Now, first, we're going to go with a lot of the old school fans and the biggest voices in this debate on yes, it should be changed. We're going to go on that side first. And the first one we're going to have is the big punch here. Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s take, responding to journalist Chris Knight about all of the races ending under green or yellow or whatnot. See, Chris Knight believes that all races should end under green no matter what, just like what ARCA has. Dale Earnhardt Jr. had other options. He said, quote, "I 100% respect your opinion. Mine is the opposite, though. I don't think there should be an overtime at all. If a caution ends it, so be it. No green-white checker was fine with me for most of my life. It hasn't had a profound effect on my enjoyment of racing since being implemented," and then a few emojis to really emphasize that. And I think this is the way it is for a lot of more old-school fans. A lot of fans say, hey, end it on the advertised distance no matter what, and you will avoid a lot of these controversies. After all, when you look back at some of the more famous moments in NASCAR history, one of them is the 1998 Daytona 500, where Dale Earnhardt goes underneath the checkered flag under caution to win the Daytona 500. It doesn't sour his legacy at all. It doesn't make the race any less dramatic than it was in that moment. In fact, racing back to the line, which I will say will not be re-implemented no matter what happens with this rule, made it more interesting. Having the caution be able to fly at any time to end the race made it more interesting because, hey, Dale Earnhardt might have to hold off Jeremy Mayfield and Bobby Labonte for 2 or 3 laps, or he might just have to hold them off until they get around turn 4. So that's really big on that front. And for this side, the advertised distance is enough. Not every race has to finish under green. I know that NASCAR fans don't like comparing to stick and ball sports. I don't either. But it's the equivalent of the kneel down effect. Yeah, you pretty much know who's going to win. But something crazy might happen. Somebody might try to hand it off, fumble it, and it gets returned the other way. It probably won't happen, but it could. Somebody could run out of gas going under caution to win a race. It's happened before, and if this were to be re-implemented, it would happen again probably. And look at the Indy 500. The Indy 500, many times before, has finished underneath the caution and checkered flags. And what happened? Well, nobody bats an eye at it. It still is an amazing win for that driver, whoever it may be, and is a staple on their legacy. The Daytona 500 would be the same way, as well as a lot of other NASCAR races, and it would pay the same amount of points as a race finishing under a green-white checker finish. And look at all the crashes that ended the 2023 Daytona 500. Getting rid of overtime would avoid tons of unneeded carnage that really just, like I said, isn't needed. When you look at those last 2 green-white checker finishes for the Daytona 500, 22 total cars combined were involved in crashes. That is over half the field in the span of only a couple laps. In 20 or so years of this rule being implemented into the NASCAR Cup Series, since the middle of 2004, there have been 264 cars officially tallied that were crashed after they went past the scheduled distance. This is also not including the ones that happened either right at the finish, on the last lap, or after the race, including, say, these two huge and firework-inducing wrecks.
It's going to be a drag race all the way back to the start-finish line. No caution. They're side by side, right to the line. Big crash. Here they come. Checker flag. Junior will win in Daytona. And the big one happens behind them. Oh, my God.
And on top of all of that, even with the green-white checker rules, the way NASCAR has them laid out, on average, a race a year will end under yellow anyways. It happens no matter what. So these people are arguing, why not just have it end at the scheduled distance instead of drawing it out for nothing? And I'll say this. One thing that I brought up on Twitter that would be defending getting rid of the green-white checker finishes is the fact that it would save teams money on wrecked cars at the finish of these races, especially the 6 now super speedway races. NASCAR has been really big on cutting costs for the teams by firing people, by telling them to really slow down on their spending. But what about saving them the costs of having to repair tons and tons of damage to these next-gen cars that are still very new and still very expensive for teams, especially new ones? It'd be a better alternative, like I said, than firing people. It'd just be better to leave those people employed so they can work on a car for the next week. Now, while there's a strong argument for abolishing the overtime rules that NASCAR has, there also are some very good arguments for why that should not happen and why they should be kept in place or maybe tweaked a little bit, but not gotten rid of whatsoever. And one of them is that fans, and I think fans have a right to say this, have said that after watching 3 to 4 hours of racing, watching all these drivers go through all of this, that we and the drivers and teams deserve a green flag finish. That the most drivers possible should be able to try and go for the win if they've survived this long and put themselves in position to do so. Cutting the race short would only nullify what would be ultimately a really good event. It could make an event, say like 2004 at Talladega, really, really good turn into really, really bad because a fan favorite can't go for the win against their rival. In 2004, like I said, this was a breaking point for both NASCAR and fans. There were numerous races where either the cars would be stopped under a red flag for cleanup because it was only 5 to go or so, or they would just ride around under pace laps until they went under the yellow and checkered flag, and there would be little to no resolution to what was ultimately a really, really fun race, depending on which one you were watching. And numbers that have been put up also have said that in 37% of green-white checker finishes, a new driver, somebody who's second on back, goes up and takes the lead from that driver who led at the scheduled distance, and they got their shot at the win, just like that guy who was leading had their shot to hold them off. And that 37% of the time, while not the majority, is still a very big amount of the time, and is enough to warrant keeping this rule in place. No matter what carnage is happening, no matter what kind of, say, bad finish happens because of it, it should stay in place so drivers can have the chance and should have the chance to go for a win. And this doesn't always happen at the Daytona 500. It could be, say, Texas. It could be the Chicago Street Course. It could be any number of different racetracks or races that NASCAR needs to run well, whether as a new facility, a playoff race, a championship race. Imagine a championship ending under caution because they changed these rules up. That is what people who are saying to keep the rules or adjust them are really arguing, that this could change the course of NASCAR history with the way that there are so many quote-unquote Game 7 moments that would be short-term losses or gains that turn into long-term repercussions on the season. And they also argue other sports have overtime. Why can't NASCAR? Just because other racing doesn't have an overtime doesn't mean NASCAR can't be different. It sets them apart, which they're not wrong. It does set NASCAR apart from other racing series and helps it fit into American sports culture. And Added to all of this, the networks would argue that, hey, the more restarts we have at the end, the more crashes we have, and the more intrigue on who wins the race, it would drive the ratings up, as people tend to try and stay to see who wins the race and what the finish will end up being. It's the same as well on YouTube. You have an iRacing stream, people stay until they can see who won, no matter how many restarts there are. And also, this has been around for almost 20 years now. This is precedent, and is it really warranted to change this because there was one bad Daytona 500 finish? There's two ways to look at the verdict for this that I'm going to give. One is NASCAR precedent, the other is what I think. NASCAR precedent would say to wait it out. See if this is the only really bad or controversial finish under these rules this year, and if it is, just ignore it, sweep it under the rug, and people will only talk about it next year. But if it's something that's more controversial throughout the year, say the Coke 600 turns into the Coke 650, say that Talladega has Chase Elliott out front and then he gets screwed on an overtime restart, or Ross Chastain runs out of gas and Denny Hamlin ends up winning, well, fans might have such a loud outcry that NASCAR would be forced to change it back. NASCAR has changed rules mid-season before. Look at the restart rules. Double file restarts in 2009 were implemented after about 14 or so races, maybe 13, and then the choose cone was implemented in the middle of the 2020 season. So this isn't something NASCAR hasn't done before. As for me, what is my verdict on it? I say axe it. I'm a traditionalist in a lot of ways, and this is one of them. Run to the advertised distance. These drivers had all race to put themselves into position, and if they can't make it up in that one lap, knowing the rules going in, that's on them. Run to the distance, have it at a set endpoint. You won't go over TV windows either, which probably will help in ratings as well if you're not having 3 or 4 restarts to try and decide the finish. Go back to what worked for basically every other motor racing series in the world through to today, from however far back it might be. But now I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think NASCAR's overtime rules should be changed or gotten rid of? Let me know down in the comments below. While you're at it, leave a like on this video and share this video. Subscribe to the channel for more great NASCAR content. Thank you to all my channel members for your continued support. And also, program alert. Be sure to watch the second race of the NR Cup Series on Idk Player's channel tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. I'll be co-commentating. And then the NASCAR Weekly Podcast is tomorrow night at the same time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, on Black Flags Matters channel. Can't wait to see you there. And until then, have a good one.